What's up, gamers? DreamcastGuy here, talking today about The Last of Us Part 2 Remastered, because the reviews for this have finally dropped, and I must admit, I've been very interested in this because the project itself is not something I ever expected to even exist. I kinda like The Last of Us Part 2. Not the biggest fan of Abby, the story itself was just not exactly my cup of tea, but undoubtedly, the gameplay, the graphics, the existence of the world itself has always been jaw-dropping. It's been so freaking impressive. But the remaster, ever since it initially got announced, I kinda just wondered, what's the point? Well, today, the reviews have begun to drop. Critics are actually breaking down the new aspects of new game modes, new side content, new graphics to see what's actually good about this, and the reviews have been extremely positive. I did find one negative review, which I want to take a peek at, but let's see what they're actually saying. Okay, if you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a like and subscribe if you haven't already, but let's get into this. Look at those freaking review scores. Just so many 10s, so many 9.5s. I mean, it's just kind of insane that this is still such a huge juggernaut of a title. You know, I just wasn't sure if the scores would be higher or lower than the original, because sometimes with these remasters, you've had a couple of years to reflect, to digest. I mean, sometimes you actually see scores of a game be lower than the original. Like Last of Us Part 2 right now is a 92 on Metacritic, but something like Last of Us Part 1, this got an 88, despite the fact that the original version obviously got like a 9.5 out of 10. It's one of the highest rated games of all time, and yet the remake, which is the exact same game, but more beautiful, got a lower score. I was kind of expecting this. I was expecting the remaster effect, where even though it's a better product that's better presented, it ends up coming in a little bit lower than the original. But people seem to be completely impressed by it. So I've been watching a lot of videos, reading a lot of articles, and everybody's talking essentially about how much better the game itself plays, but not a lot of people seem to be mentioning the graphics. I mean, a side-by-side comparison, is this really that different? This is PlayStation 4 versus PlayStation 5. I guess this water is slightly more shiny. I mean, there's always this weird thing I want to call the Halo 2 effect, where if you have a game that is the best looking thing that's ever been put out on a console, and then you release the next game, the graphical jump is not going to be that big. You may remember this if you've been a gamer for a long time, but when Halo 2 came out on the original Xbox, it was just insane. You had visor reflections, you had particle effects when grenades were going off, you had tons of multiplayer maps and online multiplayer, so people were really impressed with Halo 2, and then Halo 3 came out as an Xbox 360 launch game, and it wasn't that big of a graphical leap, but it's just because Halo 2 looked so good already. Okay, that is pretty impressive. Wow, holy God. Some of the detail of the clothes themselves and I guess faces have definitely been touched up, but you know, you're not probably playing this for the graphics, the remastered part of this. People are more curious about the extra content, the things that have been completely added. Now, there have been lost levels. These are things that were cut from the original game and they're pretty incomplete. So apparently it's these little additional scenes that show parts of context that we initially missed. Extra snowball fight stuff, times where you get to play with Ollie the elephant. There's a water puzzle that got cut, and people seem to be pretty thrilled about the fact that this was removed. But when you're playing this, you get director's commentary talking about the effects of it, the fact that this was cut and why it was cut. That to me is cool. It's actually interesting to hear somebody in the game itself talk about why something exists, why these puzzles work the way they do, why these combat sequences function in a particular way. Like, apparently though, most people love this. Obviously, you've seen the scores themselves. Everybody is just saying it's a perfect package that's now even better. I did find one score, one review that was less positive than the rest. This was a 7.5 out of 10 over on Inverse, and I wanted to take a look at this because I'm curious of their critiques. I am buying this. I am going to actually review it myself on Friday, but as it currently stands, I'm buying it because it's just so cheap. If you actually own it on PlayStation 4, you can just pop this disc directly into your system, and it's a $10 upgrade. You get the roguelike mode, you get all these additional graphical upgrades. Apparently, the load times have been shredded. So, I mean, to me, that's worth the $10. If I was paying full price for this game, I don't think I'd get it. But I'm curious enough to buy it and test it and play it and make a video out of it myself. But here's the one person that basically seemed to love it, but dramatically less than everybody else. Now, I already read this review, and a lot of his criticisms kind of come from the point of view of, why does this exist? And I do feel like that is a fair criticism. We just got The Last of Us Part 2 not even 4 years ago, and now it's coming back. But you see, he talks about this. Maybe the game is too young for a re-release, but it's still a technically impressive game. Now, I think the thing about this that I'm the most excited about, so I'm just always just hearing people talking about it gets me excited, is this no return mode. This is a roguelike. It is a game mode with randomized enemies, randomized elements, randomized upgrades, and you're trying to survive as long as possible, and it ends with a boss fight. No Return feels a lot like Resident Evil's The Mercenaries classic mode than a traditional roguelike, with loadouts that are constrained to the characters you've picked, along with their general traits. This actually complements No Return well, since stages involve taking on waves of enemies with some conditionals, like melee hits setting enemies on fire. Still, encounters can get stale pretty fast. No Return also comes with only 4 game modes. Interesting. Assault, Hunted, Capture, Holdout, all of which revolve around defeating waves of enemies. You can pick your path through a literal web of stages laid out on a corkboard in your hideout to return to the stages to upgrade your weapons and traits. Unlocking characters is easy too. It only takes 2 or 3 hours depending on how quickly you can pass through these stages. Unlocking Joel, for example, requires working your way through a handful of characters, starting with Ellie, then Dina, then Jesse, and so forth. This forces you to engage with characters and loadouts you otherwise wouldn't, but it doesn't amount to much since everything is mostly the same in terms of clearing waves of enemies and tackling bosses like bloaters. To me, that still sounds incredibly fun, and I'm probably most excited about this no return mode over everything else we've seen. But I think the 2 pieces of feedback I've heard that have been kind of negative is I have heard multiple people say that a lot of this new content isn't that big. These lost levels that are talked about here, most of them are like literally minutes long. They're not actually big pieces of complete content. They're like little samplings of ideas that ended up on the cutting room floor. And I have heard people say multiple times that they just feel like No Return is this slapped on extra thing. And really, it doesn't quite make sense. Like, if this is supposed to be a dark, tragic revenge tale turning into a silly arcade high score kill 'em all, kind of an odd methodology. I mean, the point of Last of Us Part 2 is that violence is bad, and yet here we are playing a game with a game mode that's purely about how good violence is. I mean, I'm still going to buy it. I'm still going to review it. I'm still excited for it, but man, it's interesting that this game that already looked so great is coming back on PlayStation 5. I have been incredibly critical of Last of Us Part 2. I have actually played so many hours. I've done 5 playthroughs of Last of Us Part 2, found every collectible, maxed out every talent tree, got every single thing to make this game as big and complete as possible. And even when I don't like parts of the plot, I can respect what they're trying to do, and I'm going to play it again. I want to see these big, shiny scenes look even more insane. But how about you? Are you curious? Are you planning to buy The Last of Us Part 2 on PlayStation 5? Because if you are, tell me your thoughts in the comments down below. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a like, subscribe if you haven't already, and keep dreaming. Now, I am going to be doing a video. I mentioned that Friday. Come back Friday. I got a big video talking about this because I mostly want to talk about No Return. I want to see how No Return plays. As a fan of roguelikes, I'm curious if it's actually any good.
Thanks so much for watching that video. If you want to see something else, you can always click this link to see what I put up last, or, subscribe and see what's coming up next. Also, I promise that whatever I do, it'll try not to suck.